We're on your side with tonight's cover story. Tonight marks a date in Charlotte history most of you will remember. It's been 6 years since Keith Lamont Scott was shot and killed by a CMPD officer. Tension and anger over accountability and a demand for answers eventually intensified into days of both peaceful and then violent protests on the streets of Charlotte. That chapter in the Queen City led us to where we are today, with a call for better dialogue between law enforcement and the community, and also a call for a more equitable city, one where we can all succeed. Well, one of the faces who called for change was a local activist who in the years since has ascended into leadership here in our community, eventually serving on Charlotte City Council before now becoming Mayor Pro Tem. His name, of course, Braxton Winston. It got us wondering, 6 years later, has his mission changed? Where does CMPD's relationship with the community stand, particularly with the African American community? Our Brandon Hamilton spoke exclusively with Winston, where this story began back in 2016, and where we as a community must still go from here.
Well, 6 years ago on this day here in Charlotte, Keith Lamont Scott, and you had the protest kind of erupt out of that. Take me back to those days, and what do you remember about that time in Charlotte?
At that point in time, I was like 32 years old. I had seen a lot or whatever I had thought, but nothing like that had happened so close in time and vicinity to me. I was like, let me go see for myself what was going on. Let me not just rely on social media or the news reports. I decided, let me use this thing called, live stream. I turned it on and I just, stuck around. I remember a moment, there was a voice that came through the crowd. And turned out to be Keith Lamont Scott's daughter. It's just like asking questions, why'd y'all kill my father? You didn't have to die. And it was just like a chill came over and everything changed. And people decided, it was like, we got to get these questions answered. There was a sense, again, that people wanted to hold their government accountable. That's what I saw. That's what I experienced. The people had serious gripes. And the government was kind of saying, now it's not the time, come back later. And the people said no. We stayed there. I inhaled so much tear gas. I got hit with rocks, but also with less than lethal rounds of weapons. It's the most pain I've ever been in. They said, we're going to take our demonstrations here so the folks in these buildings, the folks, whether they be the office buildings or the government buildings, would listen to us.
So out of the protests, of course, your viral moment came with a photo, you in front of police, shirt off, and fist up.
That picture definitely represented a moment in time. I had my shirt off because it was my first time experiencing tear gas and I was trying to mask myself. So I knew that I could still use my body as well as my voice, and I knew that my fist up in the air was something that did carry a message. It wasn't about me. There were hundreds of people out there. There was a sense of community out there.
What does it mean now to be that Mayor Pro Tem and being able to put that change in when it comes to those policies and laws?
Yeah, well, we're working on generational change, and I really did. When I started kind of looking, in the week that followed the death of Mr. Scott, and in the weeks and months that followed, like I said, it was more than just this interaction between the police and the community member. It was, why did this happen here? And I built a platform of equity, access, and interconnection. And it really does come from, my experience after the death of Mr. Scott. I'm grateful that the community has been supportive of the way I've found my role to play. And I'm also grateful that while we don't always agree, my colleagues understand where I come from.
And our Brandon Hamilton joins us here live in studio. It has been really an incredible rise politically, certainly, for Braxton Winston. You talked about the photo there that everyone remembers, of course. Was he surprised at all the attention that it received?
Yeah, so he told me, I was like, Braxton, you had to expect it. He was like, no. He was surprised. He told me he woke up the next morning, all these phone calls, the national media outlets calling him. So he was kind of shocked that it kind of blew up the way it did, but he was more so thinking, okay, is the message still there? Like the reason why he was even in front of police with his fist up. He wanted to make sure that message was still kept.
There was a lot of tension, certainly, in the city, you know, at that time, and city council meetings became heated before he was on council. But here we are, 6 years later. Does he feel like we're making progress? What more do we still need to do?
So he does. He says, you know, he feels like as an institution, as the city, when you talk about the institution, those elected leaders, he says the city's doing a better job of listening. So that's one thing. And he also says, you know, the city has done a better job of looking into the mirror and understanding that there are different demographics, different backgrounds. So doing a better job of listening to everyone and their experiences when we talk about equity and other issues in the city. So he says, yes, the city has made progress.
Because that's the thing about this. Wasn't in the end, policing obviously is how it started, but it wasn't the end of the conversation. It was really about equity throughout the city, right? In many various parts of our community.
And we talked about the policing part too, and you know, when you look at Keith Lamont Scott, the policing really came into the spotlight when you bring a George Floyd in. So we talked about that, and he said, you know, the conversations still continue, which is the important part, as you just mentioned, because it wasn't just about police. There was a bigger picture when we talked about
affordable housing, transportation issues that we're facing in the city. I know he continues to talk about them, and City Council continues to wrestle with it, as you've been to a lot of those meetings to hear it. Brandon, appreciate you stopping by here and talking about it with us. Tell us your thoughts about what has happened in our city in the last 6 years. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Use the hashtag OYS Tonight. You can also scan the QR code there on your screen. Just hit contact us and send us an email.